Welcome to the Food Junkies Food Addiction Summit.
Here we aim to provide you with the experience, strength, and hope of professionals actively working on the front lines in the field of food addiction.
The purpose of this summit is to educate you and increase overall awareness about food addiction as a disease with abstinence as the solution.
Every day for the month of October, we are sharing one inspiring speaker or highlighted food preparation video from the incredible Tony Vassallo of Moda Nutrition Inc. and the Real Food Revival Movement.
We have 4 weeks of interviews with the leaders in the field of food addiction, clinicians who are working on the front lines, registered dietitians and nutritionists that are working toward bridging the eating disorder and food addiction camps, and people just like you and me.
Here we talk about all things food addiction recovery. Most importantly, how to thrive rather than just survive.
So stay positive, make a change for yourself, tell others about your change, and hopefully the message will spread.
And as Vera always says,
the power is ours. Welcome to the Food Junkies Summit. My name is Dr. Vera Tarman, and I am your host today along with Clarissa Kennedy. Hello there. October is the month when we face sugar cravings head on, starting with Halloween and ending, of course, with New Year's Eve. Each day is a new challenge for many. So in the month of October, we are speaking to people experienced in food addiction and food addiction recovery, either from the professional or personal vantage points. Today, we are speaking with Kay Sheppard, a pioneer in the field of food addiction. She has been working as a licensed mental health professional since the early 1980s. She has a virtual practice in food addiction recovery now with 2 Facebook support groups, the first one called Breaking Free from Food Addiction and the Kay Sheppard Club. I've got to say this, she is the best-selling author of probably the first book on food addiction called Food Addiction, The Body Knows, which was published in 1989, so it's been around that long. Also, From the First Bite, A Complete Guide to Recovery from Food Addiction, and finally, Food Addiction Healing Day by Day. As well, Kay is also in her own personal recovery, first from alcohol in 1967 and then in food recovery in 1977. Hello, Kay Sheppard.
Hi, Vera. How nice to see you today. What a treat.
Yes, it definitely is. So Clarissa and I would like to know, could you start with what is your story? So you started to say a little bit in the beginning, like that with alcohol and whatever. So start with where it all started and then your aha moment with food addiction.
Sure. I did start my recovery from alcoholism. And of course, my focus for many years has been on recovery from food addiction, because I think food addiction is daily. I was actually 10 years sober when I met my food addiction recovery at a meeting. And some woman came up to me, her name was Janet, and she said, do you know you talk about food and diets and weight loss all the time? I said, no, I didn't realize that. Now, that's an important statement because that just indicates how unaware I was of the problem. I knew I'd been on diet since I was 15 years old. I went on my first diet at age 15. My mother and I dieted together. My mother was a food addict too. And I just had a realization recently. My mother struggled with weight her whole life, and she died very early at age 65. And I'm sure it was related to her food struggle, you know, the medical issues related to food addiction. And one of my friends said to me just recently, do you think that your activity in the field of food addiction and your books are related to your mother's struggle? And I said, absolutely, absolutely. And I often think how sad that she didn't have good information, because she was a brilliant woman and she would have latched onto it. I know she would have loved recovery. She was very spiritual and really up until the last year of her life, she struggled with food addiction. I mean, excuse me, with weight loss issues. So I think it's been very important that I have that family history of addiction, and definitely a family history of food addiction, alcoholism, and nicotine addiction, mostly on my mother's side of the family, some on my father's. And I'm a firm believer in the genetic predisposition to the disease. In fact, I've been tested, and Dr. Ernest Noble, I'm sure you're familiar with his work, tested me, and I said, well, so how did it come out? And he said, oh, as we presumed, you have the defective gene, and we know that defective gene is dopamine receptor D2A1, and I have it. And I was talking earlier about, I don't think that I'm an alcoholic, food addict, this addict, that addict, nicotine addict. I really believe in the syndrome model of addiction, where one would have multiple expressions of addiction rather than multiple addictions. And my addicted brain and my I love the neuroscience that we now can learn about in terms of treatment and identification of food addiction is so important and so interesting. So anyway, I know I have that brain, and that's what powerless means to me. Powerless means to me that addictive substances hijack my brain. I have a brain disease, and my job is to stay aware of those messages that that disease sends to me to weaken my recovery. I think all recovery is really based on awareness of those things that will trap us into relapse, those relapse traps.
So it sounds like you're saying you don't make any distinguishing features between any of them, but it was the alcohol that brought you to treatment. That's the thing that hit first. And then somewhere in there, then this Janice person alerted you to, oh my God, there's also the food.
Yes.
And was that the aha moment that made you make those the dots connect as far as?
Well, yes, and in fact, so I said, well, is it a 12-step program? Because of course I was definitely in a 12-step program at that time. And I said, is it a 12-step program? And she said, yes. And she referred me to one of the food programs, which fortunately at the time had an abstinent food plan. I was so blessed because I was able to get abstinent 43 years ago. 43 years ago this month, actually. Actually, it was 43 years ago in January, and I had one relapse in August, and I've been abstinent since August. But what happened was, that was November, and we had all those holidays ahead of us. So I'm going, well, you know, I don't think I'm interested in that program until after the holidays. You know, I wasn't putting it off till Monday. I was putting it off till January from November.
That's
so yeah,
like a true food addict.
and it's a good thing I did, Vera, because I bought my father a box of candy for Christmas, and I ate it 5 times before I finally gave him the last box of candy. And here's how I ate it. I hid it in my dresser drawer, and I ate it in the bathroom. Typical food addiction behavior. And I'm on my way to the bathroom to eat my father's box of Christmas candy. And the thought came to my mind, this moment, grace, moment of grace, the moment of awareness. What is wrong with you? You ate all this candy. You never shared it with your family. It was your father's to start with. There's something really wrong here. I had been eating in secret for, well, 30 some years, I suppose, by then. And finally it occurred to me, this is a problem. So that was December. In January, I was at a New Year's Eve party, and Janet came up to me again. She said, did you get to those meetings? And I said, no. She said, did you change your mind? I said, no, I really believe I have to do it. And she said, when? she was very assertive. She said, when? And I said, just as soon as I finish this. And I had a big hunk of cake in my hand. But I did start those meetings in January. I stayed abstinent until August. I had one just one quick relapse. I ate one candy bar, and I came to the belief and the realization that if I wanted an organized, productive, sane life, I needed food addiction recovery, and that was my conviction, my intention, and my intention has never changed.
So you've said a couple times an abstinent food program. So what was that abstinent food program, and has that changed?
Okay, well, well, it has changed in terms of becoming more practical. I think more. We've included foods that were not on that food plan. That food plan was really nutritionally unsound, and we have added complex carbohydrates to that food plan, and we've done it very safely, because I really believe that that we can have complex carbohydrate as opposed to refined carbohydrates. And we can have them safely if we always couple them with protein, because the L-tryptophan in the protein actually moderates the serotonin from the carbohydrate. So balancing protein and carbohydrate is really important in that food plan. So that's one of the things we've done. But basically what it does is eliminate all of the addictive substances. It eliminates all of the addictive trigger foods. And I have pages of things that that I abstain from.
Well, for the purposes of our listeners, give us some like actual foods that you realized that you had to stop, or that you stopped from day one, that you call abstinent.
Yes, and continue to this day abstain from sugar. I abstain from any refined food. I believe that we have refined food addiction. I really think when we call it food addiction, we're not quite specific enough. It's really refined food addiction. And so I abstain from all refined foods. I eat whole foods. I eat whole grains. I eat whole vegetables. I eat food that just hasn't been processed. I like to use an apple as an example. I eat the whole apple. I don't eat applesauce. It's too reduced. I don't drink apple juice. It eliminates all the fiber, and it's just flavor and sugar and water. So and that's the refinement process, I believe. I don't drink orange juice. I eat an orange. And I eat 6 ounces. So yeah, I weigh, I measure, and I do that in order to manage volume, because I was a volume eater. I ate the whole thing every time, no matter what. Didn't we really? My food plan provides good nutrition. It's really all good food. And you know, I think I'm blessed in a way to be forced by the horrible disease that I have to be forced to eat good food. Isn't that awful? I mean, and our food is wonderful. I think people are always surprised at how delicious and good our food is, because it's real, and you know, it's God-given. It's wonderful.
Hey, I'm just wondering, can you talk a little bit about how you went from your personal recovery to now working with individuals professionally? And then also, can you touch on, when you work with individuals professionally, what about that volume piece? Like, how do you work specifically with volume addicts? Because there's a lot of them that'll be listening to this today, and they'd love some strategies around managing volume.
Okay, I think we've got 3 questions going here.
I know, there's a lot.
One of them is, how did I go from personal recovery to professional? Yeah. And again, Janet was actually the director of a Navy program. And it was the Navy Substance Abuse Awareness Program, and food was included in that. And I talked to her one day, and I said, you know, I think I'd like to, at the time, actually, I was an insurance claims adjuster, and I worked in the insurance field for many years. But at that time, I said, I think I'd like to become an addictions counselor. She said, I think you'd be good. So I went to Rollins College, and I got my master's degree in counseling. And I went to work in that Navy awareness program. And things went on and on. I worked in an outpatient program. Actually, I did my internship in the Navy inpatient program. And then I worked in an outpatient program. And then I was invited to work at Naples. They had a large food addiction program. Fred Schneider was the director of that program. And actually, I went over there to work in the substance abuse awareness program, but I quickly moved into the food addiction unit because I had recovery in that area. So that was the beginning of my professional work with food addicts. And one day I got a phone call, and I was invited to Melbourne, excuse me, Melbourne, Florida, to interview to open food addiction units for a treatment center called Heritage Health. Heritage is no longer in existence. All of the owners actually are deceased, but I developed those food addiction programs for Heritage.
I just want to interrupt you. What I'm hearing you say, because I can't believe this. So just confirm. You've just mentioned 2 or 3 inpatient units for food addiction in a substance abuse model. So they
Yes.
have actually existed, and we've never heard of them. Like that's incredible.
Oh yes, my dear. Yes, Naples Research.
So
It was Naples Research.
gone. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, it's now renamed, and I don't know what they're doing there now. But and then Heritage. I don't know why the owner of Heritage was interested in food addiction, but he was the good friend of Father Martin. Are you familiar with Father Martin's Ashley in Maryland? Well,
Yeah.
he and Father Martin were good friends, and he was calling me, and he was talking about Father Martin, and he said, "Would you like to come over and talk about opening food addiction units for us?" And I think it was something so simple as that he was afraid his wife was a food addict. And for that, and we started talking philosophically about our treatment philosophies, and they were perfectly aligned. I think it's impossible to work in an area where you're not philosophically aligned with the treatment approach. So I opened programs in Virginia, North Carolina, and Florida at that time. None of them are in existence now because, as I said, the owners have died.
Yeah. So and is that where the Kay Sheppard food plan was developed? Was through these centers?
It's been evolving.
Because you're well known for your food plan.
Yes,
Yeah.
The food plan has evolved, and I believe we're lifelong learners in terms of addiction and recovery, and it has evolved from that very basic food plan. We eliminated some things from that plan, and we've added some things that weren't on it. But I will say about I can guarantee our food plan, unless there's something that somebody personally has a problem with in terms of allergies or something like that, our food plan absolutely leaves us with no craving and no hunger. We are not hungry. We do not have cravings. And as far as I'm concerned, as a recovering person, eliminating craving is the absolute foundation of my recovery. And I'll share.
Ditto. We all agree with this. We're on the same page.
Yeah. I'll share about a craving I had, Vera. I was having extensive dental work done, and the dental assistant gave me this little shot glass, and she said, "This is mouthwash, there's no alcohol in it." And I was so impressed that she was aware of my needs that I put it in my mouth, I swished it around, I spit it out, and I said, "There's something in it that's not good for me." And we rinsed my mouth, and I got it out of my mouth, and I said, "I don't know what was in there, but I'm sure it was glycerin." And so about 3 o'clock that afternoon, I had cravings. literal physical cravings. Now, I never swallowed that stuff, but enough was absorbed through the mucous membrane of my mouth and I had cravings until that evening, and I couldn't figure it out. I'm going, why? I didn't put two and two together as a professional. I should have, but I didn't. And finally, the next day, I was talking to another person in food recovery. Actually, we shared food plans with each other. And I said, oh my gosh, it was the mouthwash. And it lasted really until that evening. I had physical cravings for whatever. I don't know what I was even thinking about. I'm sure that my brain thought of something I would have liked to have.
So tell us about volume addiction then, because you mentioned that earlier.
Yes, well, that's why we weigh and measure, of course. And I think people question, oh, do I have to take a scale here and there with me? Is that important? And I think it's a discipline. I think the it's one of the disciplines of recovery that I definitely endorse. I personally weigh and measure every mouthful of everything I eat. I feel it provides me with guilt-free eating. It provides me with a way to manage volume, and it affords me the opportunity to be very honest about my food. I was a volume eater. I was a volume sweets eater, actually. Sweets were my definite thing, but that doesn't mean that I just had to eliminate sweets. I had to eliminate everything that would trigger a craving. And apparently there's a certain mouthwash that will do it. And I imagine there are many mouthwashes that will do it, which I don't use any of them. So weighing and measuring, I think, is critically important. And it also maintains that balance between protein and carbohydrate, which I think is one of the things that makes our food plan scientifically sound. We have. Do
you feel like you need to do that still 40 years later?
Yes, because I'm still honest, I'm still disciplined, and I'm still like to be guilt-free.
Because I know there's people thinking, you got to be kidding, 40 years. I mean, I agree with you, but
yeah, I have a client that's been in I'm sorry, I have a sponsee that's been in recovery 26 years. She weighs and measures, and if she changes part of her tuna fish to salmon because she didn't have enough tuna fish, she reports it 26 years later, because it's one of the disciplines, accountability. And that's another principle of weighing and measuring. I'm accountable, I'm honest, I want it guilt-free, and I don't want to be iffy. I don't want to be iffy about it. I don't have to be, and I'm not. I think people question taking a scale to a restaurant, but I have to say, I've done it. Well, I haven't been in a restaurant for quite a while, Vera, because I stay home these days. But taking it to the restaurant, very few times has anybody even noticed that I weigh and measure my food. It's just what I do. And I ask for an extra plate and I weigh it. I just weigh everything. So it's, I still do it. I can't see not doing it. And I can't imagine why I would stop.
I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit more about, you said it's a scientifically sound abstinent food plan. And I know in the food addiction field, we have some dietitians, professionals who think grains are not okay and they cause cravings. So could you speak to that a bit?
Yeah, certainly, because I'd say they absolutely do not if they're whole grains coupled with protein. Now, if somebody believes that they trigger a craving, that's going to be a problem for that person. I don't believe they do, and they don't. As I said, I avoid my whole goal of recovery is to avoid cravings 100%. And I eat brown rice, I eat millet, I eat white potatoes, I eat, and I have and I'll stand on the fact that I have the gene. So I am an absolute addict. There's no question about it. I've got documented proof from the premier researcher of that gene, that defective gene. So I come from a family of addicts, and I know I'm an addict, and I know I can eat grains. There is no doubt in my mind about it. And I will say that this is a progressive disease. And if I, after 40 some years, can still eat grains, I have to say, and my disease has progressed for all these years, although I've been saintly. I've been clean and sober and abstinent. Then I just don't believe for a minute that a real addict cannot eat whole grains and starchy vegetables if they're always coupled with protein and they're always measured. Now, if somebody has a specific grain that they're allergic to, they might have a problem. If somebody is allergic to all grains, I question that, because I think some grains are grains and some are seeds, and they're different things to start with. So we have people, we don't focus on weight loss. It's not a goal. We like to say that we focus on recovery and we'll lose weight. If we focus on weight, we'll lose recovery. So we really make recovery our focus, not weight loss. But I will say that we've had people that have lost 300 pounds on this food plan, eating grains, 220 pounds eating grains, 150 pounds eating grains. And, one time I was doing a little retreat with recovering food addicts, and there were two little tiny women there, tiny little things, petite, adorable. Both of them had lost 150 pounds each. You would expect that they would have some issues with that, but they were just looked so lovely. They were so wonderful. And to this day, they maintain those weight losses years and years later. So they all eat grains.
Yeah. I mean, those of us who are cautious around grains there is a genetic predisposition to some people just simply cannot process those type of carbs, and they have to be like almost to the point where they don't eat carbs, that many carbs at all. It's not like we're saying it's the whole population, but it seems to be a smaller subsection of the population that can't tolerate even grains. Yeah.
Maybe. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't work with them, I guess.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
So what would you say in all your years of experience is the number one challenge that individuals face or struggle with in finding the right food plan? Like, do you think that there's too many options, or like, what is your take on that?
Well, I think denial is the major drawback to finding the food plan to start with. I don't know. When people come to me looking for information, my food plan is free. I just say download it from the website, and we'll work from there. And we just find many people. I think that many people do well on it, and they know they do well on it. But I think relapse is a bigger issue than finding the right food plan, to tell you the truth.
Yeah.
Relapse is just a major issue, and the causes of relapse are really either never developing a strong background, a strong program, a strong support system, network, or never developing one and then letting it weaken, so that people let go of the disciplines. But I think it requires a lot of discipline to recover. I personally, I'm 80. I'll be 83 in 2 weeks, and as I said, I've been in recovery starting 54 years ago, and I abstain from alcohol, all prescription drugs. I'm on no prescription drugs whatsoever. I've never used street drugs, nicotine, caffeine, and refined foods, and anything else that might trigger my craving, an addictive response. So I really, I'm really free. I'm really free of addictive substances.
So outside of your food plan, of which is a very well-known food plan, like I think probably it's the first food addiction plan that's been published, and that's been around for a long time. I mean, I've known about it for a long time. What else do you do in clinical work? Like, I'm assuming that the food plan is number one, but then how else do you support it? Because you've mentioned support. So in your clinical work, what else do you do?
Oh, I'm so grateful for that question, Vera, because I think a lot of people perceive me as a recovering person and not as a professional therapist. I'm a licensed mental health counselor. I have my master's degree in counseling. I really favor behavioral cognitive behavioral therapy. And what I do when I work with a client, I like to work with them on the mental, emotional level, and even the spiritual level. But I leave the 12-step work to one sponsor. So professionally, I do therapy. And basically what I like to do is stabilizing. I don't traumatize patients bringing up old issues and inner child and family of origin. I actually help them work on the here and now, what's going on now. And I think when people resolve today's issues, they're actually resolving things from their old beliefs and their old ideas and their old pain. So I do here and now stabilizing work. I've known too many of my own clients who I've worked with to stabilize, and they go back to a therapy that opens them up, and they go home and binge to
that's such a good point to make, because one of the things I've seen, and probably Chris, you've seen this too, is once the person puts down their food, all that emotional trauma comes up, and there's a real invitation, and more than any other addiction, because food is the last barrier, right?
Absolutely.
And it's a real invitation for the therapist to say, well, let's get into this trauma work. And I have to say, I'm with you, that I've seen far too many people relapse because they're not ready to do that trauma work, because they still have to live in the here and now of today.
Absolutely. Yeah. I so concur with that. I just worked with a client today who's in very early abstinence, and we talked about how vulnerable she is. And I said to her, I said, all that pain you didn't deal with because you ate instead of dealing with it is all surfacing now. And it's a very vulnerable time. Early recovery is, I don't know another word to describe it more than vulnerability. It's really tough. Those first weeks and months, even the first year of recovery, is really tough, because one really needs to stabilize in so many areas.
I think that there's probably, Chrissy, I don't know, I'd be interested to know what you do, because you do a lot of clinical work, but I think there's a real controversy around that. Whether should we jump in and deal with the trauma, or should we back off and just stabilize? I mean, I know of a number of people who believe in the trauma work, ASAP, but clearly that's not where you stand, and I personally feel the same way as you on that one.
Vera, I have a Facebook page.
Yes.
It's free. There's over 6,000 members, I think. And I asked the question, how many of you went to a therapist for your food addiction and went home and binged because you opened up a lot of pain? Over 100 people concurred that had happened to them.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah.
So Kay, can you talk a little about what it was like? Like, it sounds to me like in the beginning of your career, people were accepting this food addiction, and then things kind of started to, treatment centers were closing. Like, what is some of the pushback you've had, and what have you seen in the field, like in your years of experience?
My publisher is Health Communications, and I did a workshop, a presentation at one of their conferences in San Francisco decades ago, probably in the 80s and maybe early 90s. And it was like for substance abuse professionals. And I was doing my presentation, and people walked out. They would not buy it, and they didn't like the idea of nicotine cessation either.
Oh my gosh! Wow.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It was it was interesting at first, but again, I think as a concept, I mean, I know you and all of us in the field have worked to make it acceptable as a term, refined food addiction or food addiction instead of eating disorders. I think there's a lot of trouble in the eating disorder field for food addicts because they really don't get treated according to the addictions model. So many of them have serious issues because there really isn't understanding of the physiology of the addictive process.
So how did you get your clients then? Because the eating disorder model has been reigned supreme for the last 20 years or so. But you have been standing firm since the 80s. So
oh my gosh.
How did you get your name and your toehold in there? How did you get a publisher? Like this, like I said, you managed to get your foot in a way that many of us didn't. Well, yeah.
Well, I have to say that God works in my life because when you say, how did I get a publisher? I had 5 publishers asked me to write a book.
Oh my God.
And Janet Woitis, do you remember Janet Woitis? She wrote the book, Adult Children of Alcoholics.
Yes.
Yeah, Janet said, choose health communications because they'll never stop printing your book. And that's true. As you said, that book was written in 1989 and they're still printing that book and they're still featuring it as a bestseller.
Oh my God. Well, it is. And folks, if you have not seen this book, it is a staple. It is literally a staple in the food addiction world. And another staple is that I don't know if I'm right about this, but I've always associated one of the 12-step programs as being yours. Is that true too? Did you adopt one?
No.
No?
No, I've never started a 12-step program. Okay. No, I've certainly supported, I've supported them. I've sure supported them. And I will say that one of them that started in the maybe early 90s was started by someone from one of my treatment programs.
Yeah, and I think has been using your book as a platform.
Probably, yeah.
I don't think we can say too much more because of whatever
anonymity,
but
confidentiality. Yeah.
Yes. Okay, so we'll leave it at that.
Yes, indeed. Yeah, I've kind of blown my own anonymity here today, haven't I?
Yeah.
Yeah, we recover out loud and proud, so it's all good here in this forum. I'm wondering if you can speak to, in working with clients clinically, what do you see that individuals are doing when their recovery works well? Like, is there a characteristic? Is there something that they do that you're like, wow, I have this gut instinct, this person is getting it?
Intention, commitment, and accountability. Absolutely. People, we suggest, we suggest meetings, we suggest step work, we suggest sponsorship, we suggest a lot of things. Just yesterday, I went over the whole program with one of my clients. I said, let's just do an assessment of the strength of your program. And we just went over every bit of it. And, here's my belief. I believe that addiction, during the course of active addiction, the brain develops to support, encourage, and promote the disease of addiction. And I think it does it on 2 levels. The midbrain, that's hijacked by the substance, and the cognitive brain that's rewired to support addiction ideas that promote addiction. So I think there's a clue I'm working on a book. I would like to say I'm working on it, but I'm taking notes. I'm making notes on a book. And the title of it is Addiction Speaks, Recovery Answers. Here's the deal. Recovery has to answer every time addiction speaks. It comes from that brain that was structured by rationalizations and general and justifications, and because of that, that brain is going to be sending out messages of you can have just one, you can start again tomorrow. You know, all of those things undermine the idea of I am powerless. I have a brain that's going to go crazy on sugar. I'm going to just say sugar for specifically, but any addictive substance. I have a brain that's going to operate, and it's not going to believe me. And my brain doesn't believe my rationalizations and my justifications. It's going to act like an addict every time it gets an addictive substance. That's powerlessness. That's step one. I have no power when it comes to addictive stuff. I just do not. I don't know where I went with that. Does that answer your question? I've forgotten the question by now.
Yeah, no, that's perfect. So what would you say to those individuals who are struggling with that powerlessness piece? Because those are probably those individuals who keep going back to the food.
I know it. Well, when you say go back to the food, you're talking about relapse.
Right.
You know, I work closely with Terry Gorski on relapse, and I have a relapse prevention program developed by Terry and myself for food addiction. But what I know about relapse, excuse me, what I know about relapse is there are certain things that create an atmosphere for relapse, and one of them is, you know, it's commonly said in recovery, resentment is the #1 offender. So, you know, resentments, anger that's not dealt with certainly is a relapse trap. Ego demands. I don't have to do this, or you know, just ego demands. Ego demands doesn't take into account the fact that we need to surrender to the fact of our addiction. It's as simple as that. Surrender to the fact of addiction, period. That's it. And then surrender to the course of recovery, which is whatever works, you know, whatever Kay Sheppard said works, or whatever Vera says works, or whatever anybody says works. Surrender to that, surrender and compliance. Well, surrender versus compliance. You know, compliance isn't quite good enough. It has to be, I think it has to be a firm intention. You know, when I moved from New York to Florida, I had been in alcohol recovery for maybe 8 years. And I went to a meeting to say goodbye. And I said goodbye to this woman I had been going to meetings with for those years. And she said, you know, I want to tell you something. When you came into our program, nobody thought you'd stay sober. You were the craziest alcoholic that ever came to our meetings. That was quite a distinction, because it was Rochester, New York, a big city. But anyway, I was the craziest one. And I said, you should have asked me, because I've always intended to recover. That's why I'm recovering from everything, because it's my intention to live in recovery, period. I have no other option. I don't consider any other option. And I think whatever the excuse might be to pick up and eat, I have a friend actually in recovery who says a cookie crumb has more power than I have. And I like to think of it that way. I don't have any power over those substances, because my brain knows it, and I know it too. So
not even one little bite off of somebody else's plate.
exactly.
Yeah,
oh my gosh.
So Kay,
I shudder when you say that.
yeah. Can you tell us a little bit about, I got a sense of your food plan, a little bit about your Facebook groups. You have 2 of them. And I guess
Yes.
you still have an active practice. If you can tell us a little bit about your practice in your groups.
Oh yeah. Well, my practice actually is a phone teletherapy. I had to stop doing workshops and retreats and stabilization programs for individuals because of the pandemic. I'm aging, and I'm very concerned and I limit my exposure to people almost 99%. And so I do teletherapy, and then there's a free Facebook page where people just share, and I kind of keep my eye on it and tell them, you know, how to get started and that sort of thing. And then we have a paid membership Facebook group called the Kay Sheppard Club, and for that we have definite things that we post every day. Accountability, education, affirmations, suggestions, just really a lot. It's very creative, and it's wonderful. I just sit down to determine what I think is exciting about recovery today, and that's usually what I put on the club. And then also with that club, we have a training call once a month that's educational. And then we have a practice call once a month where we practice what some of the members practice: relapse prevention, rational some kind of we call it circle work. Actually, it's cognitive therapy, and just it really is just examining a particular feeling. So we do that. We have a Q&A training once also. So that rotates. We rotate various trainings and that, but that's a paid membership. And other than that, that's basically what I'm doing now, the teletherapy.
Okay, can you tell us about your books? Like that Food Addiction, The Body Knows, that's, like I said, it's a staple since the 90s or late 80s. Tell people who don't know you what that book is about and your other two.
You know, Vera, sometimes we study that book during meetings, phone meetings. Oh, we have phone meetings too. We have oh my gosh, we have phone meetings like more than once a day. But when we study that, I'll go, how did I know that in 1989? There's information in there that I wonder how I even knew that. But it's pretty basic in terms of the disease of addiction. And the food plan is not current. I always recommend that people get the current food plan from my website, kaysheppard.com, rather than use the ones in the books, because the food plan has evolved as we learn things. We giveth and we taketh away. We do both, and basically.
What about the other two books?
The other two?
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
From the First Bite and Healing Day by Day.
Yes, yes. Well, From the First Bite, I think and I think people really like From the First Bite. It's more emphasis on I think Food Addiction, The Body Knows is like understanding the disease and certainly recovery. But From the First Bite is more focused on recovery and basic recovery, and just covers the topic, I guess. And then Healing Day by Day was kind of fun to do, and that just is every day. We look at something more specifically, and it includes an affirmation for that subject, whatever that subject is. So it's all about food addiction. That's my life is all about food addiction.
That's great. And we will link and highlight all of the places that the audience can find you. We do have a signature question we would like you to answer. And it is, if you could tell yourself, a younger version of yourself, something about food addiction or food addiction recovery, what would it be?
Well, you phrased that. There are things I would tell my younger self. But what I would tell my younger self about food addiction wouldn't have any relevance, because what we know about food addiction today, there was no information, there was no, there was nothing. So it wouldn't have relevance. But I think if I wouldn't tell my younger self to abstain from sugar, because then I wouldn't be who I am today, would I? So I don't know. I guess basically I would tell my younger person to do the next right thing, whatever that is, to live a moral, ethical life, to learn about honesty and patience, to learn about the principles of living a healthy life. I might suggest that exercise would be on that list of the right things to do. And I would suggest an attempt for healthy eating, but I can't imagine my younger self saying no to that Easter basket when it showed up on Easter Sunday morning. I don't think I would have had the interest in abstaining from that. I probably abstained from candy for 40 days before that. Anyway, so I don't know that I would address the disease of addiction with my younger self, but I would certainly recommend a healthy lifestyle on many levels, and it's not something that was particularly emphasized in my childhood.
Is there anything, I'm just going to add to that signature question, is there anything that you would tell a younger person now in 2021 based on that you have?
Oh yeah, I mean, I've got a little book. It's just a little book I printed, and one of my friends did the illustrations, and the little book is a fairy tale for food addicts. And what I would do to a younger person is give them a copy of my little fairy tale for food addicts, because it talks about sugar, flour, fat, and it talks about how those things affect the heroine of the little story, who is Frances Adams, and food addict. We call her Fafa, and she has a recovery. She has disease demon on one shoulder and a recovery cherub on the other shoulder, and it's really a little story about how the addiction speaks and recovery answers.
That's a book that exists right now.
Well,
that somebody can find.
It's not really. I have some of them I had printed up, and I just hand them to people that want to educate younger people. Yeah.
Okay. Well, Kay, I want to thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today. For people listening, Kay Sheppard is like I said, I'm going to say it again, a pioneer in the field of food addiction. And your book has been like the only book that was around for the longest of time. So it's really wonderful to speak with you. And, you know, you're still going strong. And I mean, you know, you're still, 40 years? Anyway, thank you so much. You're a great model, especially in person.
Thank you. What a treat. I'm so glad you asked me. Nice being here with you. Thank you, Clarissa.
So it's such an honor to meet you.
Oh, that's nice of you.
Thanks for joining us today on the Food Junkies Food Addiction Summit.
If you would like to hear more, tune in every Friday to the Food Junkies podcast, available on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, Audible, and anywhere else you listen to your favorite podcast. Subscribe so you'll never miss a show.
Don't forget to pick up a copy of Dr. Tarman's book, Food Junkies, which is available on Amazon.
If you have any additional questions, both Molly and Clarissa are food addiction professionals and work one-on-one with clients. Their websites and email addresses are available at foodjunkiespodcast.com.
As Vera always says, the power is ours.